How are you, Sacha?
I'm well. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me.
My pleasure, man. My name is Ruben. I'm from the Dominican Republic, and after watching your documentary, I watched it a couple of weeks ago. It just struck me because I knew Luis as a musician. I love jazz. I was raised in an environment and a very musical environment, and I never knew about his thought about social injustice and how he faced government, how he faced being black back then. And it's not too much different being black right now. I grew up in a country where being black is not, it was not such difference to be black in here. But how do you think that what we don't use Louis Armstrong as a representation of social injustice with all the work that he did back then?
Because there's a lot of misconceptions about Louis Armstrong. People don't know his story. I went into it growing up in New York City in the 80s, loving Public Enemy and thinking that, not that Public Enemy told me to not like Louis Armstrong, but the perception was that he was a sellout, a step and fetch it, dancing for the white man, whatever. And it wasn't until I did the research that I learned that he was the exact opposite of that and was probably the most creative person ever alive. I can't name anyone in the modern era who was as funny as him, could sing like him, plays instrument like him, fine artist, a great writer. Who you can't name anyone like him. So when I learned about who he really was, I was completely blown away. And I think that some of the stuff you're saying, I think people will really see who he really was and hopefully find inspiration in who he is.
What struck me is how many we have now from the things he did. Even we love musical. Like he was the first black person in a poster with a huge letter, on his name, and we don't see those things back then. Do you think that culturally speaking, what was the biggest influence that he has that we still living on the things that he created? Because he was pioneer in many things that we don't appreciate, that we just have it now for granted.
Well, he changed the way people made popular music. He changed the way people sang. There's that example in the film of how popular music sounded back then in terms of stylistically. It was very stiff. It was very, I don't know, operatic maybe or something, very white. He infused something into the music that gave people a little bit more freedom in terms of expression. And so when you consider, where he was as a black man in America at that time, and freedom isn't necessarily the first thing you think when you think black man, but he taught America a certain level of freedom through his expression. It's just like, everyone's talking about, did you see the Elvis movie? Did you see that, he went to a black church and he learned all this stuff? Like Elvis learned some things that gave him a level of expression and freedom that he didn't know that he had. And so Armstrong's influence is like water. It's every day. It's in plain sight. And most people don't know. And hopefully after seeing this film, people will know.
Why do you use the black and blue subtitle after his name for the name of your movie?
Well, the song, he says in the song, my only sin is in my skin. I mean,
yeah,
that's what the whole thing is about. And
yes,
the idea of abuse. And so, if you're struck, sometimes what's left behind is a black and blue mark.
And even that question, like, do you feel different? You were white in this time instead of being black in a white world. Like his music would have been different. Like all these questions that people ask him back then in interviews, in presentation, it just struck me because it's like you say, like many black people saw him as the puppet master of white people, but he was below that. He even faces Eisenhower and he faces government and he wasn't scared about it. And I learned that the guy was worldwide known. I thought that he was very local, but like Louis Armstrong was something that the people around the world appreciated and still known, and it's a symbol of music.
Yeah, he was one of the probably the most famous person in the world at one point. People knew him everywhere. And so when you think about where he came from and where he wound up, it's just, you have to be a real special person to be a Black man during those times, to overcome all those things, to become who he became. It's just a phenomenal story.
You have made documentaries about hip hop, about the culture in the 90s, end of the 80s. Why suddenly you want to do something about Louis Armstrong? What was the interest that you had to make this piece of work?
Well, they called me and offered me the gig, but what I realized when it comes to Black music in America, and I did a film about Wu-Tang, I did a film about Rick James, who was a funk rock guy, and now I did Louis Armstrong. It's the same story over and over again. The music is a reflection of and a reaction to the environment. And then the environments have not changed. There's still police brutality. There's still, joblessness, no social capital, educational system is inferior. All these things that are designed to keep you in a particular place. Many of us have escaped by way of by the arts, right? So Armstrong escaped, Rick James escaped, and RZA escaped. So I realized it's the same story over and over again. And it's interesting every time. But to me, I've come to believe that when it comes to Black music in America, there aren't genres. There's just people and environment and circumstance. And what comes out is a reaction to the environment and circumstance.
Do you think that we can separate the private life of an artist and their political opinions for his music, of his art? Because Louis, back then, he used to merge both of them and create something different, and create something that even Elvis used to create his political views with his music. I think that's the same thing that Louis created.
Right, and what's great about it is he didn't have to tell you that he was a genius. He didn't have to tell you how much money he had. He didn't have to tell you the craziest politics that really polarize and piss people off. He led by example. He let his creativity and his art do the talking. And when he had to do more than letting the art speak for him, he spoke up. So he married the two. And he didn't wake up saying to himself that he wanted to be an activist. He wanted to play his instrument. And in the process of doing that, there's a lot of bobbing and weaving he had to do to get there. And I think it's an inspirational story that a lot of young people hopefully can connect with now.
What do you think the young people can take from this movie right now? Because we live in an era where anyone can say something in social media and immediately it's an influencer or it's entitled an opinion, but it's not an opinion based on an experience. It's the opposite of, it's like not having social media back then. What do you think the young people can take from this movie in this moment of everyone can say something and outside in social media?
Yeah, I think it's integrity and being true to yourself. I mean, Armstrong didn't have social media, but he had the Klan and all kinds of racists on his ass all the time. So if he can navigate that in the real world, you should be able to navigate in the virtual world and not even get caught up in it. But I understand times are different, and this is how people communicate. This is how people express themselves. And it's unfortunate that certain people who are musicians gain access to platforms, and they could be completely out of their minds, but because the platform is hungry for views or clicks, they'll exploit that person, and that person just poisons the air with just horrible ideas. And this is where we are. But I think at the end of the day, talent always rises to the top. And it was Armstrong's talent that changed his life and changed the lives of many people around him and changed the lives of people who are fans of his music. And he just he stayed on message and he did things. He didn't talk shit. He just went and did his thing. And I think that's something that anyone, anywhere can relate to. And it's a great message for people who want to do things.
Do you think that foreign people can take the same idea of a person who lives in the States? Let's say like I come from the Dominican Republic, I come from the Caribbean, my idea of Louis Armstrong is different than a person like you who grew up here. What do you think that I can take as a foreigner and learn from this experience after watching your movie?
Well, it's the same thing. And my wife is Dominican. My mom's
Oh,
from
I'm
Haiti.
Dominican.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
awesome.
My wife's Dominican. My mom's from Haiti, right? So you understand that, right? And yeah, my father was African American, so I understand the whole thing. And we have more in common than we don't. But things are designed for us to believe that we're different and that we're separate. But we got it over here the same way on the same ships, just different. You know, some ships got diverted to different places. But I think a non-American person or a non-American person of color can certainly, I know what it is in DR, like you said, like it's no walk in the park if you're Black. So it's applicable anywhere someone's oppressed, whether you're a woman, whether you're a little person, whether you're different somehow, and you're up against a system that is not built for you. Louis Armstrong's story is relatable, highly relatable and inspirational, and people should be able, from anywhere, everywhere, should be able to take it in and find inspiration and learn something from him.
Sacha, thank you for your time. Congratulations for this amazing work. I loved it. And I'm just looking forward to see how far it can go. Like, I hope it goes everywhere.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Do you think you've lost by being born Black in a white country?
No, I don't look at it that way.
The greatest influence in jazz of all time, Louis Armstrong.
Old empty bed.
Jazz almost stems from Louis Armstrong.
Wished I was dead. What did I do?
Anybody who has uttered a sound on American radio,
so black and blue.
It's because of Louis Armstrong's innovations.
He never would come out publicly, but at home he had his opinions.
I've heard recordings of Pops just talking. He understood there was a battle in this country.
I don't have no flag other than a black flag.
That's right.
There's a rumor that you invented scat singing.
It came to me just like that.
To be Black in those days, the discrimination was unbelievable.
His own inner dignity was able to make him prevail over all these awful conditions he worked with.
What did I do?
He was the first Black movie performer to have his name above the title.
He was trying to use his music to reform and lead the country closer to its higher ideals.
Arkansas had decided to make its own laws on the subject of integration.
Louis said Ike and the government could go to hell.
Everybody was astonished, but privately, he expressed stuff like that all his life.
My only sin
all over the world
is in my skin.
He had the respect
they laugh at you
and the love of millions.
And scorn you too. What did I do?
What more can any man ask for?
To be so black and blue.
Yeah.